deep within the royal palaces of France, amid shadows, secrets, and whispers, there is a story of a queen who defied power, time, and even death, a woman whose name became legend, whose mystery continues to fascinate historians and curious minds alike. They say she kept secrets no one was meant to know, that she pulled the strings of the kingdom while smiling, and that even death seemed to obey her. This is the story of Catherine de Medici, the queen who inspired dark rumors, impossible intrigues, and myths that survived for centuries. Welcome to the court of shadows, to the realm of power and fear. They say that in a hidden chamber of the Tuileries Palace, among faded tapestries and extinguished candles, bodies lay still, bodies of men, motionless, beautiful and terrifying, covered in perfumes, oils, and silk. They were, according to rumors, the former lovers of a queen, a woman who, unable to bear the passage of time, had supposedly ordered them to be embalmed so she could keep them by her side for eternity. Her name, Catherine de Medici, Queen Consort of France, mother of 3 kings, and one of the most feared and fascinating figures of the 16th century. Around her, history erected a wall of suspicion, witchcraft, poisons, intrigues, and, of course, dead men. But where did this story truly come from? Was there really such a secret room? Or was it all a fable created by her enemies to turn her into the perfect monster? The truth is that for centuries, the myth survived. Foreign travelers visiting the royal palaces spoke in hushed tones of the Chamber of Lovers, and each retelling made it darker, more lurid, more irresistible. In a time when a powerful woman was seen as a threat, Catherine became the embodiment of fear, a widowed queen, Italian, surrounded by astrologers, alchemists, and scheming courtiers. It was easy to imagine her practicing forbidden arts. It was even easier to blame her for everything men could not explain. And so, between superstition and desire, the legend of the queen who collected embalmed men was born. Yet behind the shadow, there was a real woman, a strategist, a mother, a survivor in the midst of the religious chaos that tore France apart. Long before rumors painted her as a witch or a murderer, Catherine de Medici was just a child, a girl born within the gilded walls of Florence in 1519, descendant of one of the richest and most feared families in Europe, the Medici, bankers, patrons, rulers without a crown. A dynasty that bought popes, financed artists, and decided the fate of kingdoms from the shadows of their palaces. Yet the brilliance of her surname did not protect her from misfortune. Within days of her birth, Catherine was left orphaned, her life beginning amid family intrigue, broken alliances, and wars that ravaged Italy. She was the last piece of a family torn apart by power and vengeance. Her childhood was a parade of confinements and escapes. During the sack of Rome, enemies of the Medici took her hostage. Young Catherine was locked in convents, forced to survive among nuns, prayers, and the echo of cannons shaking the city outside. There, she learned a lesson that would follow her all her life. Power is not begged for, it must be survived. That observant, quiet girl, pretending to pray while listening to forbidden conversations, began to understand the rules of survival: observe, learn, and endure. When her family regained control of Florence, Pope Clement VII, her uncle, sought to secure her future. There was no better way than to marry her to a French prince. Thus, at barely 14, Catherine was sent to an unknown country, speaking a language she did not know, to marry the second son of the King of France, Henry of Orleans. The wedding, celebrated in 1533, was an alliance between Medici gold and the Valois crown. Florence and France united in a dance of power that Catherine barely understood. Yet behind the festivities and embroidered dresses, destiny was already preparing her for a far greater and far darker role. For in that court, filled with poets, spies, and lovers, Catherine would discover that love was merely another form of politics, and to survive, one had to learn to manipulate. Catherine arrived in France as a foreigner. She spoke with an accent, followed Italian customs, and although her dowry was immense, no one welcomed her with open arms. The French court, elegant yet cruel, was a stage where every smile hid a dagger, and she, barely a teenager, had to learn to move among predators. Her husband, Henry, was distant, quiet, even sullen, and worse, his heart already belonged to another, Diane de Poitiers. A woman 20 years his senior, beautiful, intelligent, and devastatingly influential. From day one, Catherine realized her marriage would be a shared loneliness. Diane became not only her rival but also her shadow. She dressed like her, spoke for her, and even influenced the king's decisions. The queen consort seemed a guest in her own court, enduring public humiliation for years. While Diane slept in the king's chambers, Catherine observed silently, noting every gesture, every whisper, every slight. Behind the mask of obedience, a heart of stone began to form beneath the skin of the young Florentine. She understood early that survival in France depended not on love, but on cunning. Years passed, and Catherine struggled to bear an heir. The court whispered that she was barren, that God punished her, that her Italian blood carried a curse. Yet after years of despair, she bore her first child, and then 9 more, one by one, as if her body were avenging the mockery. The king, though never loving her as he did Diane, began to respect her. Catherine's mind sharpened like a blade. Nothing escaped her: alliances, rumors, glances of betrayal. She observed the court with patience and memory, turning even banquets, balls, and illness into tools of strategy. Portraits of the time depict her dressed in black, the color of mourning yet also of authority. Her eyes, fixed and calculating, reveal the mind of a woman who understood that compassion was a luxury no monarch could afford. The Queen Mother began to earn nicknames: the Italian, the Poisoner, the Black Widow, each a measure of the fear she inspired rather than a record of crime. In her chambers, astrologers, alchemists, and magicians passed through, reinforcing the legend that Catherine consulted dark forces. In truth, she was deeply superstitious but practical. If a prophecy or horoscope offered a political advantage, she used it without hesitation. Among these advisors was one who would mark her legacy: Michel de Nostradamus. His visions fascinated the court and whispered fear into her name, which Catherine knew how to exploit subtly. By the end of her early years in France, Catherine had become a master of perception. She transformed humiliation into resilience, invisibility into observation, and loneliness into strategy. The young Florentine who arrived timid and foreign had hardened into a queen with a heart of stone, ready for the challenges that lay ahead. The death of Henry II plunged France into uneasy silence. In the corridors of the Louvre, laughter ceased, intrigues froze, and the nobles glanced nervously at the woman they had once underestimated. Catherine de Medici, the silent widow, had overnight become the most powerful figure in the realm. Her eldest son, Francis II, barely a teenager, ascended the throne. But the true reins of power were firmly in her hands. France was fractured by religious wars, Catholics and Huguenots clashed violently, provinces burned, and the kingdom teetered on the edge of collapse. Catherine walked a delicate line, like a tightrope walker above chaos. She wielded alliances as weapons and promises as bait, convened banquets while signing decrees of life and death, smiled at ambassadors while sending letters capable of shifting the course of war. Her intellect and cunning were unmatched, and soon, the court realized that before them stood not a widow, but a strategist who had spent years learning the shadows. The rumors of dark arts, poison, and secret dealings swirled around her. Feeding the myth of the queen who manipulated fate itself, Catherine understood the power of perception. Fear was sharper than any sword, and whispers could topple kingdoms. Her consultations with astrologers, alchemists, and even Nostradamus reinforced the aura of mystery, turning superstition into political advantage. Then came the darkest night, the street Bartholomew's Day massacre. That August morning in 1572, the streets of Paris ran red as thousands of Protestants were slaughtered in a frenzy that shocked Europe. Some accused Catherine of masterminding the violence, others saw her as a reluctant instrument of circumstance. The truth remains obscured by time. What is undeniable, however, is that from that day forward, her name was forever entwined with fear, power, and legend. Catherine ruled not only through her children but through the image she projected, a queen whose authority was absolute and whose presence commanded respect and dread. In these years of regency, she cemented the myth of the Dark Queen. The woman said to keep a secret room filled with the embalmed bodies of men she loved and lost, a legend that would outlive her reign and echo through history. Over the years, Catherine de Medici ceased to be simply a queen. She became an enigma, the Black Widow of the French throne, mother of kings, a woman whose life seemed to blur the line between politics and superstition. From this blend of power and mystery arose one of the most enduring rumors in history, the story of her forbidden cabinet. It was said that in the cellars of the Tuileries Palace, a hidden chamber existed where the queen kept the embalmed bodies of her lovers, men she had loved, admired, or used politically, preserved as trophies of a love that refused to die. Legend described walls lined with dark velvet, the air scented with myrrh and death, and figures in courtly attire silently observing anyone who dared enter. At the center stood an altar, above which hung a portrait of Henry II, the one she never forgot. Yet the reality was far less sinister. No contemporary records mention such a room, and palace inventories list nothing resembling it. The myth likely emerged long after her death, fueled by rivals, storytellers, and foreign visitors eager to dramatize the queen's life. In truth, Catherine collected portraits of philosophers, generals, scholars, and courtiers in her study rooms at the Louvre and the Tuileries. These cabinets of curiosities were common among Renaissance nobility. Over time, however, imagination transformed portraits into corpses and keepsakes into obsession. Writers and visitors added layers of supernatural intrigue. Catherine's reputation for consulting astrologers and alchemists became fodder for the legend. But she was practical above all. She used superstition as a tool, not an end. The forbidden cabinet tells us less about cruelty than it does about how fear and fascination shaped the stories told about powerful women. Widowed young, witness to endless wars, and mother to children who would fight for the throne, Catherine's life was filled with ghosts, but they were the shadows of her decisions, not of flesh and bone. The myth of the forbidden cabinet endured, a Gothic image of a queen surrounded by the dead, watching over her kingdom from a chamber beyond time. It is a false portrait, yet immortal, a symbol of ambition, mystery, and the power of legend. When Catherine de Medici died in January 1589, France was a weary country. Religious wars had scarred cities, shattered families, and toppled crowns. The Queen Mother, aged and ill, passed away quietly, never seeing her dream of lasting stability fulfilled. In her final years, the court she had once commanded with a glance had grown indifferent, and the nobles who once trembled at her presence now regarded her as a relic of a dark past. Catherine died in Blois, far from the splendor of her youth, in a cold room, without ceremony. Her body was eventually interred at St. Denis alongside Henry II, although war delayed the journey, leaving her coffin forgotten for months, as if even death hesitated to claim her. Thus ended the life of a woman who had survived conspiracies, impossible loves, plagues, the loss of children, and the scorn of history. Yet even in death, she could not escape her greatest adversary, memory. The real Catherine, pragmatic, intelligent, and sometimes cruel, was soon devoured by legend. Chroniclers and pamphleteers transformed her into the Poisoner Queen, the Italian witch, the mother of massacres. A figure surrounded by the macabre, each generation made her darker, more terrifying, more fascinating. In truth, Catherine's achievements were vast. She introduced ballet to the French court, supported architects, artists, mathematicians, and astrologers, and designed gardens and palaces that still bear her mark. Her vision shaped France in ways far subtler than fear or myth could capture, yet history preferred the dramatic. It was easier to imagine a queen surrounded by corpses than by ideas. With her death, the last great Medici on the French throne passed away, and with her children's early deaths, the Valois dynasty ended. The Bourbons rose in their place, inaugurating a new era. But Catherine, the Queen of Shadows, lived on through stories, paintings, and films, embodying the archetype of a dangerous, intelligent woman, a mixture of brilliance and darkness, beauty and mortality. Perhaps her true immortality lies not in embalmed bodies, not in superstition, but in the enduring power of myth. Catherine de Medici did not defy death with poisons or magic, but with what history grants to those it cannot forget, the longevity of legend. They say that time erases names, but not shadows. Catherine de Medici was many things: queen, mother, widow, strategist, monster, and myth. History judged her with fear, and that fear made her immortal. Perhaps the stories we tell of her are more about fascination than fact, but the very fact that we imagine it says more about us than about her. We are fascinated by cursed queens, by women who dare to reign in worlds that deny them the throne. Catherine was one of them. She needed no witchcraft to alter history. She simply survived. In a Europe ruled by men and vengeful gods, she chose the only form of eternity power can grant, the eternity of legend and myths, like the dead who refuse to rest, never truly disappear. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed learning about this extraordinary event, please consider subscribing for more videos about forgotten moments in history. There are countless stories like this one, brief, fascinating, and full of lessons about power, ambition, and humanity. Until next time, I'm your narrator, and this was the Queen who loved the dead.